All right. Welcome to a brand new thing that we're doing. This is a new show. This is the Game Club Extra with me, illz, and my fellow crazy RPG fanatics of the Jump Up Supercast, Will.
Hello.
And Safir, or Saf.
Those are two of my names.
Yes, Sapphire.
Those are three.
So the plan right now is to have like a much looser schedule for these. It's maybe put out one every 1.5 to 2 months, and this will be basically just like the Game Club, but for RPGs. You know, because we don't normally have that much time. You know, we're all working people. I mean, the other people don't. I have plenty of time, but yeah. So these are for longer episodes, more for like a deep dive into RPGs, like what we're going to be talking about today, the RPG classic Suikoden II, which is a game I chose for the Game Club because I've always wanted to play. Yeah. And, you know, this game has been, long lauded as one of the great, PS1 RPGs, of that era. And possibly of all time, really. I know I played Suikoden 1 before. What are you guys' experiences with the Suikoden series?
I only heard it in passing. Like, I just heard the legend of Suikoden 2. I always was interested in playing it, but I never got around to actually playing it. So this was an exciting journey.
Yeah.
Was it the very first PSX that they released Suikoden 1 and 2 on the PS3?
Oh, I have no idea.
Anyways, well, that was the first time I played it, was that, and I played Suikoden 2 first because I was just like, that's the one I hear that's the best, right? Not knowing that it's a direct continuation of 1 in a ton of ways, right?
Yeah.
So I played it back then I played 1 after, right? And now this is the first time I'm playing 2 after knowing everything that happens in 1.
And now you're playing in the correct order.
Yeah, actually, I now understand the whole deal of like Flick and Victor, which is pretty nice considering they're like the third and fourth characters you meet in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, they're actually pretty major characters in the original game, so it's really surprising because I didn't realize when I picked this game that this was such a direct continuation of the first game. Like, I don't know if I would have picked this exactly like for someone like Saf who didn't know. But I don't think it relies too heavily on the first game. Like, it still carries itself very well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Suikoden 2 is a role-playing video game developed and published by Konami for PS1, like I said. And it was released in 1998 in Japan, 1999 in North America, and 2000 in Europe. The franchise's signature features is the vast array of characters, 108. Called the 108 Stars of Destiny, and you recruit these characters, get to your castle, and they do various things. Some of them actually become party members, some of them are like commanders in your army, some of them are like, just there to, help out, basically. And some just serve like story purposes. Yeah, this is like one of the main features of the series, and it's actually like one of my favorite things about Suikoden 1 and 2, that you collect these characters. They all have very unique stories. They have their own motivations, and when they become part of your castle, it's fun to see them around, and it's fun to have them help you in various ways.
Yeah, that was one of the parts of the games that I really enjoyed as well, like recruiting these characters and seeing how they fit into the fort that you currently have taken over. That was really, really enjoyable to see. And when there is a particular character, detective character that you unlock that joins Richmond, yeah, and all he does is just, if you pay him, and he'll give you like inside scoops, he'll give you like inside information about other characters and their backstories, and they've done a really good job in like fleshing out some of these characters to quite a degree.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's I think a clear improvement from 1 is Richmond, right? Who I kept always thinking of just as Gumshoes because he just looks detective archetype, right?
Yeah.
But there wasn't really a character like him in 1, and to direct you towards the characters you may be missing, right?
Yeah.
Which this is the first time I did the full 108 playthrough, and so there was a lot of times there. It's very useful to go up to and be like, hey, give me a clue, just point me in a direction, right? which was nice. And I think the thing that's also nice, like you said, about 108 characters. It's not all of them are playable, right? Some of them are purely provide like a service for you at your home base. But there's it allows there to be a big variety of like different archetypes and different backstories for these characters. You know, like you can have characters that are really serious and have really involved like backstories, like Clive, right, which has like a whole unique side quest only to him that involves like beating the game at a certain rate, right? But then also here's just a whole family of flying squirrels that wear capes and think they're superheroes, right?
Yeah, it gets very strange, but yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, and so I think that variety is nice, ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about it is that, I mean, only about like 40 or so actually are playable in like your party. You actually use them in normal battles. But the rest of them don't feel like throwaways. Like they still feel like pivotal parts of your team, because when you go back to that headquarters, you need them to do things. Like you have people to sell you armor, or add runes to your pieces of weapons or whatever, or your characters. You have a blacksmith. You have like a fisherman does a dice game. And they have all these mini games. Like the cooking mini game is just super deep. Yeah, it's like just a bunch of interesting ways of interacting with the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They have like one of the weirder ones that I saw is like, well, two of the weirder ones is one they actually affect the sound effects of like the menu swaps. One of the characters actually changes that depending upon what sound tests you get in the game, and the other one just changes like the format of your menus itself, which is a weird thing to do for video games, where it's like you'd expect them to do it in the main menu, but they decide to just make it a gameplay feature and just have a little fun experiment like that, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a cheat, basically, to make a character useful in some way. But, I mean, it's nice. At least they give them something to do. They're not just standing there.
Yeah.
There's one character who's a cartographer, and, like, you need a map in this game. And if you don't find this guy, it just makes roaming the overworld so much worse. But it feels better when you actually get him. You actually feel like you accomplished something worthwhile, which is kind of a sneaky way to do that. But whatever. We'll forgive you this time, Suikoden.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be happy to see it in every game, but it was a nice, unique thing in this game. Like, I don't know why. That was a unique thing, and I was like, I'm kind of impressed by that a little bit. Even though I wouldn't dare to think about splitting up the menu or splitting up like fucking options.
Yeah, they do the same in the first game. Yeah, basically.
All right.
Yeah, it's such a pain in the ass, but it's.
Because part of the thing I think that's cool about Suikoden, and this sort of like touches on all of this, is a theme throughout the entire series, right? Really, from everything of my understanding, is you're always facing off against what is like a larger military force, especially at the start of the game, right? And so almost all the games do dedicate like a very good portion of it to, like, if we're gonna start a revolution, if we're gonna try to like, or fight against like a oppressive force, like we can't just go, right? Like we have to like find a strategist, we have to find a base, we have to find people that can make that base operate, right? Like, and they sort of are willing to take the time to dedicate to getting those things, so that ultimately when the time does come and you are mounting this thing, you're like, oh no, like I did build an army from nothing, right? Which I think makes, even though we can get to the actual battles themselves that take place on the like strategy maps, I think that the idea, right, of when you get to them, you're like, oh man, like it does feel like there's a culminating point, right? Yeah. That is sort of undermined a little bit, like I said, because so many of those parts are scripted, but we can get to that later. But I do think that ultimately Suikoden just has especially two, I think, a lot of different parts of the game all feed into each other really well, right? There's a good feedback loop of, you do a main story thing, you go recruit characters that are now available because of doing that main story thing, you go back to your base, see how it's improve your characters, and then you sort of keep that cycle going,
Yeah.
And it makes the whole journey like feel more personal, because you don't have to recruit these characters. They're essentially all optional, aside from the main story ones. But a lot of them are optional, and it makes the army feel like yours in a way. So and you're even like recruiting like the lowliest characters, like a farmer, a little kid who takes care of farm animals, a librarian. Like they're never like fighters or anything, you know. They're never like important parts of the story, but they're still adding on, you know what I mean? They're still contributing to the war effort, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of like the mechanics, like you were just talking about the army battles, there are 3 different kinds of battles in this game. Standard battles, just basically, you know, your standard RPG, random encounters. Duels, which are one-on-one fights between usually, well, always the main character and somebody else, which is like a rock paper scissors thing. And the army battles. How did you guys feel about the standard fights?
Standard fights were fine. Like, I really liked the rune mechanic and how you had a lot of chance to like experiment with different types of runes in order to be able to better equip your characters. And I think I don't know how it works, but like the more you use it, the more powerful the more powerful spells you get, and the more runes you equip. I think that's how it worked. But
I think it's based off a stat.
Is that all right?
Yeah,
fair enough. Regardless, it was still pretty fun to just be able to like learn better spells and to be able to like equip different types of fucking runes that not only affect your ability to magic, but also have different types of like stat boosts in some cases, or like ability boosts, which is really, really cool.
No, for me, I think it's interesting. I think part of the thing is with you when having roughly like 40 to 50 party members, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard to make them all be differentiated. Obviously, with like each of them having unique skill sets, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that they stepped up from 1 to 2 is that a lot of characters do have unique runes, right? Because the idea is that they're stars of destiny, right? And throughout the whole series, different characters inherit the different stars, which are all different runes, right? And so there's that, and there's also an affinity stat that different characters can have that you can get more information on from whatchamacallit. Gumshoes, gosh. Richmond, yeah, thank you. And so that sort of is how they direct you a little bit, right? Like, hey, like, this character's good at this, you know, this character's good at that, right? This character's a healer, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a neat way to do it, but they don't force you down those paths, right? If you have a character you really like, you can make them work. You know, the game is not overly hard in a way that having, you know, like the boatsman, the guy who just does boats, right?
Taiho.
Like his stats wise, he's not great, right? He's the highest strength stat, nothing else. But my first playthrough, I just really liked his vibe, so I just made him work, you know. And that was kind of like Pokemon, right? Like you can the game's not overly hard in a way that you can make sort of any combination work as long as you are paying attention and trying to get the best out of them, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that strikes a good balance.
Yeah, they're highly customizable. Like, not very. I don't think there are many people who have their unique runes, but even still, like, they have more slots to add, you know, runes on, and you can add runes to their weapons. And one of the things that I think is pretty cool in this game is that everybody has, you know, their weapon, and you never have to buy weapons for them. You just upgrade them with the blacksmith. And I always thought, like, that's pretty neat that you never have to change it. They always have a weapon that's completely unique to them, and you can see how that weapon grows every time you upgrade it. I always thought that was cool from the first game. And
like some of those weapons have like unique attributes, right? Like one of the characters uses like a boomerang, and the boomerang can hit a row. Yeah, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, and speaking of the ranges, each character either attacks in short range, medium range, or long range, which kind of adds a little bit of strategy to your party composition. You have to make sure to choose people who can hit, you know, if you want to hit from the back range, you have to be either medium or long range, and long range characters can hit anybody on the other side, and medium range characters can only hit, you know, either from the back row, they can only hit the front row, or if they're in the front row, they can hit both rows. So you have to be able to, you know, balance that. I thought that was a pretty neat feature, and gave you, you know, it was like a restriction that made you use more characters that perhaps you wouldn't use.
Yeah, it would allow you to diversify for sure. And that was a very nice touch. Also about it is, well, there was team attacks as well. I'm not too sure how much you guys used it.
Unite attacks?
Unite attacks, that's what it was called. But yeah, like I don't know how much you guys have used that, but
a lot.
I would love using it when Joy was in your party, or Jowie. Yeah. Because that was a fucking powerful ass move. But as the game progressed, I seem to have relied on it less and less and less, because there was so many different characters and there was so little Unite attacks that were available to these characters.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Unite attacks a lot, and it's very cool. Like, some of them are awesome. Like you said, Ryu and Jowie have this very powerful attack, which is clearly, supposed to be an attack that you can only use for a limited amount of time. Because if you had that attack the whole game, it'd be overpowered as fuck.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have Ryu and Nanami's family attack. You have a bunch of other characters. It's usually that they have predetermined relationships within the story, and then they have a Unite attack. And I thought that was awesome, but I wish there was more variation, maybe, or like you could gain more Unite attacks, like if you use them more, something like that. I thought that would have been,
or even tying them like a side quest, right? Like these characters build up a bond, they unlock a team attack.
Yeah. And there were some characters, like side characters, that didn't, I'm pretty sure didn't have a team attack, even though they felt like they should have. Like maybe Khan and Sierra should have had one, or Futch and Humphrey, I'm pretty sure didn't have one.
Yeah.
Which is kind of strange, because they are basically a package deal.
Yeah. Especially the characters you get in duos, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's a little hard is giving up 2 slots can be...
Yeah.
It's a lot, like that's essentially 2 slots for a guaranteed 1 turn thing is like, it's sort of like a summon, like a Final Fantasy game, is the way I view it, right? Like, you do it, the animation itself is a lot of fun and it has unique effects, but like, it's not useful enough to really like overlie just like having normal spells, know? You sort of, you do that, you see the novelty, and then it sort of wears off and you go back to the norm.
Well, for some of them, I felt like some were really useful, like Tengar and Hicks's summon double Unite attack actually felt pretty like good. It felt better than them attacking on their own, and same with Ryu and Nanami's Unite attack. I felt like those were really strong.
Yeah, I had a lot of use out of Kinnison and Shiro, which is like the dog and the archer.
Oh yeah,
they were pretty cool.
Shiro's sick. Love Shiro.
Shiro's great.
Shiro's a good boy. 100% a good boy.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, I think it's really interesting too, looking at the game, like, because I think the Unite attacks are a fun implementation of connections in a battle, right? But also, I think that like you said, like the animations themselves are really cool, and I think that's a big aspect of this game is they made the decision. We're gonna do pixel art, right? And then have some like 3D effects, like when we're doing like big spells and stuff, right? But primarily it's pixel art, and I think that has helped it age visually a lot better than a lot of PS1 RPGs, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's sort of, I think it's really neat that they interviews the creator, I forget, but he talked about how essentially. For the narrative they wanted to build, like they thought they couldn't get characters to emote enough to convey the story they wanted to tell, right? Yeah. And that's ultimately what led them to go with the pixel art style, and I think that also translates to like the battle sprites, everyone when they win has a unique win animation, right? They convey themselves well surely through the visuals of like how they all attack differently too, right? Which I think is cool.
Yeah, speaking on the pixel art aesthetic of it for a bit, initially for the first Suikoden, they didn't feel like you were saying, like the technology wasn't there in order to convey a story like they wanted to convey. So that's why they stayed away from him. But by the time of Suikoden 2, they felt like the technology was there, but they didn't have the money for it. So that's why they stayed away from it for this game, which I thought was an interesting juxtaposition there.
Yeah. I was about to say, just to build on a little bit, and just to bring it back to Unite attacks, the Unite attack that I found really, really fun were Nanami's and the lead character, whatever the fuck his name is.
His name is Ryu in the novelization, but yeah.
Right, Ryu, that's right. So Ryu and Nanami is really fun because it actually shows a lot about those two characters as they fight. Because sometimes they are in sync and doing the same fucking moves, and sometimes Ryu's just doing the moves and Nanami's just drinking tea and just fucking relaxing and shit. It's fucking funny.
Yeah.
Like, that was a really, really nice touch. And again, it speaks well to, like, the fact that they picked pixel art because they can use them to emote these characters really well. And you see that implemented so well, so beautifully in the rest of the game, in their animations.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the parts I really like about the game is that they're really trying to, like, they're not shying away from I guess trying to be cinematic, I guess I don't know if that's the right verbiage, but like the opening, right? While the credits are playing, while everything's happening, you're getting a lot of just the backstory of the three sort of main characters, right? Which is Ryu, Nanami, and Jowie, right? And you see just a lot of, like, their life story up to that point just purely through flashback, right? And I think that that's something that I think is, like, difficult to do in the PS1 era, right? To not have to rely on dialogue in any way and just believe in, like, the visual language of what you're conveying makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a couple other points in the game that they do that too, right? And I think that there's even parts like in, like, this, you know, I think they got so into that idea that sometimes it almost was a detriment, right? Like, the duels exist as much to convey story as to, like, essentially it's rock, paper, scissors, right?
Yeah.
It's just they want to convey this one-on-one fight in, like, a unique visual way more than anything else, it feels like, you know?
Yes.
And sort of very similarly about, like, the big battles, like, on, like, the field, right? Is that they almost just want to make it where, hey, look at this different perspective so you know this is a significant moment, rather than how to, like, implement it in, like, a fluid gameplay implementation.
So you think it's more style over substance, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree
with
with that. I still like the duels. I think they're properly dramatic and they do lend enough weight. They're never, like, janky enough that they get in the way. They're still, like, a nice change of pace for the most part.
Yeah.
I feel like the problem really comes around with the army battles, like you were saying. It seems like they don't usually have a fail state, but they also usually have predetermined outcomes. So it often feels like you're twiddling your thumbs, you're controlling these characters for almost no reason. Like, and they're so long and such a slog, and it doesn't feel fun.
I personally just gave up out of boredom and just let Apple, the strategist, just kind of just do the battles for me.
Sure. I that's probably the ideal way to play those battles, because they're certainly, like, you're never, like, outmaneuvering a party. You're never outmaneuvering the enemy. You don't have enough movement or actions to do that.
No, you don't. Oh god, it is so frustrating. It's just genuinely so frustrating trying to just go through every single fucking Fire Emblem style battle in this game.
Yeah, because it's funny because they do implement, like, class stuff, right? Like, archers are better against mages, right? And, like, stuff like that. But they very rarely ever use it for anything. Which is, and you can't ultimately, like, permanently lose characters in those battles, right?
You can, and it's so annoying.
Yeah, which is why it's like, you either have these times where it's predetermined, right? And you're just sort of doing it. Or you have these times where you get free reign, but you have to essentially do a perfect run. You know, and that's so there's sort of, there's no moment where you're like, oh, this is truly coming together, right? There's always something annoying you. Which, when in terms of, like, the ones where it's predetermined, I was, like, okay with that, more so because I think that's, you know, essentially it's just a cutscene that you're also, like, interacting slightly more with, right? But it's this weird thing that, like, clearly was in the first game, it's in this game, they want to make it work, but they sort of, I don't know, like you said, if it's, like, a budgetary thing, right, or what, but clearly they had ideas that then they didn't have the time or resources to do anything with.
Well, they clearly wanted to expand it, because they did expand it from the first game. And I feel like they expanded it to its detriment, because after thinking about the first game's more shallow, more rock, paper, scissors style army battles, I feel like I preferred those much more than these. Because they're straightforward, there's not a lot of, like, useless action. There's not a lot of time spent. You know, each character seems to play its role. You know how you have ninjas that can, you know, do intel on the opposing enemy to find out what they're gonna do. Like, they're not hard, but I think they convey that, you know, sense of storytelling better than this game does.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought that was, you know, I thought that was like a little bit of a step down from the first game. But I mean, what were you saying?
Oh, sorry, I was just saying that's just unfortunate to hear. Because even this, it felt quite poorly developed. Like I didn't think that they would have had something even like more simpler in the previous game. Would that be the right word to use? I guess.
Yeah, it is.
I didn't think
definitely is.
Yeah. Like, I didn't think they would do it, and they tried to expand it, but like this felt like so poorly developed. And I could totally get why they would have like the option of like, here's a character to play the game for you, because we haven't really thought this through. So that sucks to hear. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely my least favorite part of the game for sure.
Yeah, though I don't think you could cut it. Right? I mean, I don't know. I think it's weird, right? Because I think that ultimately, like, there needs to be some implementation of the larger army conflicts, right?
Right.
And I think, like you said, it's just like, so I don't think that you could just say like, hey, we just can't do this, right? But it's a half step in a way that can be frustrating.
Yes, it's a bad middle ground, basically.
Yeah.
Like, simpler, like the first game would have been nice. More deeper would have been better too. Like, actually having like good character movement, good character abilities, stat growth for these fucking army guys. You know, reliable RNG, you know, indicators like in Fire Emblem, where you know how much percentage you have to a hit, you know, land a hit or something like that. So, stuff like that would have made it, you know, a lot more of a rewarding experience. And it would have made those times where it's predetermined, you know, pop more. It would have made it more impactful, I think.
Yeah, it could catch you off guard more, right?
Yeah.
Because you believe there's a capability to win normally.
Yes.
When suddenly, like, oh no, we have to run. You're like, oh,
yes,
I didn't expect that, right?
Exactly. So, yeah, that's that for the most part. One last thing about the runes. I do like the rune system a lot. I thought the animation of the magic was really cool. I didn't like that the runes do not like replenish unless you use that character in an inn. Like, you could take that character out of your party and bring him back, and you won't have those runes replenished. And I thought that was baffling for some reason. Like, I was just so confused.
Yeah, it's such a weird, because I don't see how it's gimpable. You know, like if the thought is, oh, you could like take him in and out and like take advantage of that, but like it doesn't. I don't see that being. There's no way to do that easily. Like when you're like out in the field, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they did that. It's just, who knows if it's just a weird oversight, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
But that is weird.
Yeah, I mean, it actively detracted from my experience because I kept switching characters around and I wouldn't always put them in the inn before I put them back into the base. So the next time I would use them, they would have like almost no charges of their runes, and I was like, oh fuck. This is why I went to the last battle, you know, and all my characters had basically nothing, and I was like, oh man, I don't want to.
Good lord,
I don't want to relive.
That's the worst case scenario for that.
Yeah. So I was just like, let's just see how it goes. And the game's never really challenging, so I just managed to get by, you know, just with that. But damn. Yeah, so I think we should talk about the story now.
Yes.
This game, like we alluded to earlier, this game is pretty much a direct sequel from the first game, taking place 3 years after. It's set in a different part of the world, where it's in the territories of the Kingdom of Highland and the city-state of Joustin. And these two nations have been in war for, you know, some time, and they seem to be formalizing a peace treaty at the start of the game. And you play as Ryu and Jowie, and they're part of the Highland Army Youth Brigade, which is ambushed at the start of the game. And that's basically where the game starts. And you see Luca Blight, you know, you're introduced immediately to like this main antagonist, Luca Blight, who's performing this false flag operation on his own troops to, you know, to what is the word I'm looking for?
To reincite conflict, right? Like, to ruin the peace talks, because he essentially kills the youth brigade, right, who are a bunch of kids, blames it on the Joustin city state, right?
Yeah.
And also on you two specifically, because you get away.
Right.
You're the only thing that can, like, plug that leak, you know?
Yes.
And so immediately Luca Blight is a horrible war criminal, right? Like from minute one, you're like, this guy has bad vibes, and it gets worse, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very strong start for story and for villain. Like, goddamn, you know he's bad. Like, there's very little ambiguation there.
Talk about a fucking impression. Good God.
And that's, I think, a thing that's, like, neat about Suikoden 2 story, is that it's a game that's, like, about war, but it's a decidedly anti-war game. You know, like, you know, the first half of the game is essentially spent running from the Highland Army, right? Just everywhere you go, it feels like you're never safe, which is cool, right?
Yeah.
But then also, just a lot of time is spent on, like, the human cost of conflict, right? Mm-hmm. And that sort of is mostly centered around your relationship with this little girl that you pick up, right?
Pelica.
And her and Joey and your relationship, right? And sort of, she lost her family, obviously, due to an attack, and not only her, but everywhere else, they really sort of take a lot of time to be like, hey, there's very few people that aren't, like, either going to be directly hurt in severe ways, or have had their life already affected by war, right?
Right.
Which is why, like, having it taken away at the very start of the game by Luca Blight is, like, such a good inciting incident, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
I think it's really strong.
It's impactful in a way that, you know, everybody can pretty much relate to. Like, this is, you know, the fundamental evil, you know, that you can be. Like, this is basically it. Like, you see him, and, like, he's just slaughtering people for basically no reason.
This guy
just because
so
he wants to,
extra.
because he has a crazy bloodlust. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, sorry, no, I was just adding, this guy's just so fucking extra. Like, he starts off a fucking 10, and then just continues from there with just how fucking insane he gets. And just to add to, like, what Will said about Pelica, like, I really, really like how they used other characters just to kind of show, like, the aftermath and the after effects. Like, Pelica herself, she becomes mute just because of the trauma that she experienced from Luca Blight, and it's really, really incredibly powerful just to explain, like, how devastating his effects are. It's very well done. I was incredibly impressed at how well they've implemented those themes in there.
Yeah. And, I mean, I don't know how we want to go into spoilers, right? I guess, warning, we're going to talk about pretty much the whole story here, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Luca Blight is, like you said, he's a good, pure evil, right? Like, just, like, is motivated by sociopathy, right? And there's backstory to him that you can get with side content, right?
Yeah.
But I think that he's interesting because then you sort of have, spoilers midway through the game, Jowie betrays you, right? Jowie joins the Highland Army, and Jowie is a justified evil, right? Like, you get where he's coming from, you get, you know, in a lot of ways, like, why he finally breaks down and is like, listen, we can't beat these people. There's no way it can happen, right? We've been running for so long, and we keep seeing how much is being done. Like, the best thing I have is to try to change them from the inside, right? And so Jowie then has to do a bunch of things that morally, you know, he finds to be repugnant for that ultimate end goal of trying to stop the overall conflict, right? And I think that having those two side by side, right, really, like, helps create it helps the narrative become full, right? Because if it was just Luca, it would be so black and white, right? Mm-hmm. But I think having Luca as this, like, almost force of nature, and how different characters react, basically how Ryu and Jowie react to it, sort of makes the narrative suddenly come into a full picture, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Luca is essentially, like, the essence of war itself. He's like Ares from Greek mythology. He just wants to kill shit. That's all he's about. So, I mean, even when they introduced any kind of depth to him, it's never, like, depth that makes him understandable. He's never understandable. He's always just out for blood. So, I mean, obviously they needed well, I don't know about needed, but obviously it's nice that they had another character in there. And they have a lot of characters in there, a lot of people from the Highland who are more understandable, more down to earth, more like you get their motivation, even though I would have liked more scenes of seeing Jowie struggle with that than the game ultimately delivered.
Yeah, I was about to suggest that as well, because like I didn't feel as though they did Jowie's character and Jowie's struggle as well as they did with like Luca. Like I like Luca more as the villain than I did Jowie, because his was a little bit more obscure at his fucking struggle and his problems in dealing with this sort of thing. Like I remember like sitting there going like, why am I still fucking fighting Jowie even after all this shit has happened? Like he needs to calm the shit down. Like it's over. And it was just a matter of like you giving me perspective of like, well, this happened in the story, so maybe this has an extra effect on it. It's like I would have liked to see that a little bit on the forefront of his character and the story that they tell of his character, in order to be able to get better understanding, get his motivations of going forward.
Yeah, at the start of the game, near the start of the game, Ryu and Jowie obtain this rune called the Rune of Beginning, which is split into two parts: the Black Sword Rune and the White Shield Rune, or the Bright Shield Rune. And Ryu takes the Shield Rune, Jowie takes the Sword Rune, and it's clear that these runes represent, attacking and defending, right? Mm-hmm. And this is basically their philosophy throughout the game. Like, Jowie's kind of on the offensive side. He's on the side of Highland later on. And he even becomes the king. He marries Jillia, the princess, and he becomes the main antagonist. And Ryu is the defender of the city state, and that just becomes their relationship basically. And it's sort of like implied that this is fated every time this rune comes into being. Like those two sides are destined to fight each other. Yeah, which is like it's neat. I mean, I love the focus on the runes throughout the series.
Because the characters, I mean, like, this is a continuation of one, right? But a lot of the characters aren't the same. Mm-hmm. But the sort of the way the series keeps continuity is through the runes, right? Yeah. It's almost like Persona, right? Where, like, Persona has, like, different characters, but, like, they have the, like, different, tarot cards, right? And, like, those represent, those have symbolic meaning, right? In the same way the runes have symbolic meaning, like you said, of, like, attack, defense, right? Even, characters like Victor, like, the Beast Rune has, like, specific connotations with it, right? Like, all these characters sort of are informed. It's the game never gets really explicit of, like, whether it's, like, just predestined, right? Like, the runes sort of influence your life to get to the point where you're going to force them on, like, they'll force themselves onto you, basically, right? But I think it sort of gives this, like, ultimate. I think Suikoden II also has a strong thing of sort of, like, trying to avoid inevitability, right? And I think a lot of that's represented in Nanami, right? Because Nanami is sort of this person that's caught in the middle, right? She's because Ryu and Jowie are both, like, destined, they were given these runes. But then Nanami is just, like, the little sister and, like, essentially Jowie's little sister too, right? Even if not by blood. And, like, she's caught in the middle of this, right? Suddenly, her older brother and her adoptive older brother are both caught as the heads of the two biggest military forces in the area, right? And there's many times where she sort of stops and goes, like, listen, why do we have to do this? Like, why we're kids. Why is this being asked of us, of everyone? Yeah. And like, there's a part where you can agree with her, right? Where, like, you can just straight up leave. Yes. Like, and that's one of the endings. It's just you and Nanami go off and live your life, right? Because, like, it's unfair to ask this of you, right? And that's ultimately a bad ending. But I think having that character there once again, sort of like Pilika, it helps you remember, like, oh man, like, you win most of your fights or whatever after a certain point in the game, but, like, it doesn't mean that things are good. Like, this is still a deeply unfortunate situation that you found yourself in. Yeah,
it keeps things real at a certain level. Yeah,
she's basically the player's conscience. Like, she grounds the whole story in a lot of ways. Her and Pilika, like, they show you, like, this is not the only way. It's not like a mindless, fight. There are real people here. They have real feelings about their actions. Like Nanami just wants to go home, just wants to be with her, her best friend, Joey, and her brother.
Yeah.
And that's all she wants. That she's never wanted anything else, and like she's just thrust into this whole thing, which shows Ryu like he is too. Yeah. So, I mean, it's really neat that the game makes you think about these things. And like you said, like there are dialogue options in the game, and some of them actually do lead to like really different outcomes. Like you were saying, you can leave at one point, and it turns out to be, the wrong decision because, people die and there's a whole bunch of zombies and stuff. But it's super interesting. I got that to happen by mistake because I chose the wrong dialogue option, and I was shocked when I went back and saw how different the other route was.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to change it up, but you do think, because I was going to talk about like the dialogue options and it's easy for you to just click the wrong option because of how not properly in. Like you could just spam the A button to progress the dialogue and then accidentally hit the wrong dialogue option and just go to a different sentence or miss certain key points. I was just going to shit on that a little bit, but yeah,
sure.
What was it you were going to say?
No, I think that ties. Well, I was going to say ties into that, right? Which is that like, whenever you have a silent protagonist, it's always hard to make them have a perspective, right? Yeah. And I don't think they like nail it with Ryu, right? I don't think that it's like, oh, of course I know exactly what he thinks, right? But there's enough people that surround him and they give him enough options to speak up, right? That you can have multiple interpretations of who he is as a person, right? Yeah. Which, and like illz said, they do differentiate in ways that, for a PS1 game especially, are more than you would expect.
Yeah.
Right? But like you also said, Saf, it does mean that you have to be real careful with that X button, because if you're just pressing it, sometimes you'll have a Ryu that you don't feel is right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saf, I have a question for you, if that's all right.
Sure.
So, Necklord
is
a part of this video game. And when I first played it, and Necklord showed up, having not played Suikoden 1, I was like, what? Excuse me? Did you have the same experience?
Literally, yes. I remember, I don't know who I sent it to. I remember I was playing it with, while I was chilling out with some friends, and I don't know if it was you guys or if it was someone else, but it's like, okay, I guess we have vampires now. What the fuck? And now that's an extremely big Suikoden 1 thing, right? Necklord plays a bigger role in Suikoden 1, right? And so, sort of I think it's actually a cool return, right? But it only makes sense if you've played 1,
Yeah, that's one of the like hanging strands of the second game. Doesn't really make sense without the first.
Yeah, that was the main problem with the second one, which I found weird. It's like there was clearly so much more with Victor that I had no idea about, and I thought I could get it naturally through the game itself, but they never really returned to it until this episode that we're recording, where I just realized like, oh wait, he was in the first game and he had this entire fucking shit going on. It's like, goddamn.
Yeah, I mean, there are even like tons of references from the first game, like Flick's sword is still called Odessa because that's a character in the first game and that he's very close to. And you even go back to the Tauren Republic and you see characters from the first game. You recruit characters from the first game, and really, really cool.
And I think because it's cool actually, you can transfer saves if you have a save. They did this on the PS3, which is actually cool. Which is if you have a save on your memory card, like Victor and Flick and everyone else, they like carry over their stats exactly as they were in the first game, which is I think a really neat like, oh, that makes the world feel like it is just 3 years later, right? Like these guys wouldn't degrade to be level 1 again. They've already won a war. And I think that the other thing that I think is cool is that with those characters from Suikoden 1, they don't always just end up clearly on your side again, right? The one I was going to bring up was a guy named Leon Silverberg, right? Who's a strategist in the first game, right? Is always shown as being like, he's purely utilitarian, right? Like he understands he's going to be involved in war because of his job as a as a strategist, right? And his whole thing is, how do I minimize the loss of life, right? And he has no larger beliefs beyond that, right? And so that means that he'll just pick the side he thinks can typically end the conflict faster, right?
Yeah.
And as we get in 1, you can change his mind, right? But in this game, you don't really, right? Like, Jowie and sort of convinces him to bring him on, and he and Jowie are making a lot of the behind-the-scenes machinations to try to kill Luca Blight, right? And I think that that's cool that, like, this character that was, like, on your side in 1, he doesn't change his character at all. He has the same belief systems, the same driving forces, but it leads him to a completely different conclusion in 2.
Yeah, he's more rooted in his beliefs, basically.
Yeah.
Which
And
is,
I think that they do a lot of that in this game in ways that are consistent, and in a way that I think is the sign of good writing. You know, like, the characters drive the story as much as the stories drive the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really love their relationship, like Leon, Shu, Apple, and their relationship to Matthew from the first game. Like, they're all clearly, they know each other very well. They're all clearly versed in, you know, this art of, you know, war strategy. And they play off that. Like, there's a part near the end of the game where Shu has to, like, outthink Leon in order to win a battle. And he basically, like, I don't know, puts himself in danger. And they get into this heated argument in the middle of a burning forest. And like, oh, this is not how you're supposed to, you know, do the war thing. You're not supposed to do it like this. And it's like, no, fuck that. We're going to do it our own way. And I thought that's amazing. That's a really great conflict that's not focused on them fighting each other. They're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
It's full of tension. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and like they come from the same place where they draw different conclusions, right? And I think stories like that are so interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of Luca Blight and his downfall, I think it's the best part of the game is Luca Blight's eventual downfall. Jowie and Leon, like you said, plot against Luca Blight from the inside. They pretend to be on his side, but they eventually lead him into a trap where they send him into attacking the North Window headquarters, which are your headquarters, in the middle of the night. But they send word to your side, to Shu on your side, your strategist, that he's coming. So you have to so you guys make a plan to ambush him. And it's an insane night ambush that happens. Like, he attacks the fort, but then you send like 3 parties of fighters to attack him. And this is when you see his raw strength, you know, where he fends off like 3 parties of your army. Yeah. Like, he almost kills you still.
Yeah.
It's insane.
So fantastic. Yeah. I loved that bit. It was so well done. It made like every moment of fighting him so fucking intense, and it made it so much harder to believe that there was not more after Luca Blight because of just how much it was. It was fucking very well done. Like, I thought it would be that, and then it would just be a quick ending, a bunch of cutscenes, and trying to tighten up all loose ends. I didn't realize that there was so much more after that because of just how fucking intense and how fucking major that downfall was. It was so fucking well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think it's, like you said, I think it's cool. In pro wrestling terms, they put him over real strong, you know, like even when he's losing. And I think that works for one, because it makes it clear that, like, oh, if Joey wasn't on the inside, there's no way you could have ever killed him, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how many people you amassed. Like, it had to be everything stacked against him, and even then it was close. Right? Which makes him so scary, and 2, I think, does give justification to Joey's actions, you know?
Yeah, and it's a very good culmination point, because they convey his strength early on in the game. Like, every time he's on the battlefield, on an army battle, it's an instant loss, basically. You cannot win. And his army is always like one step ahead. You scrape by. You always have to escape. When he invades the mercenary camp, he burns it all to the ground, basically. Like, he destroys like everything he touches. So when it comes to this one point, like you already know he's strong, but then you see it in like in-game terms, like in a one-on-one battle, you know, he's fighting everything you could throw at him, and he's still somehow, you know, getting through it. He's still beating like most of your characters. It's insane. And it's really a testament to it. Like, it makes him seem strong, but it also makes Jowie, Leon, and Shu seem like geniuses for their eventual takedown of this character. Like, it's a moment that makes every character involved better, which is amazing.
Yeah.
100%.
And like a thing that I like too, in a different way, is it. So much of even Suikoden 1 and like 3, which are the ones that I've played, like the story is so focused on the stars of destiny, right? And sort of like there'll be the big players on the world stage, right? Luca Blight is just an anomaly. He doesn't have a rune. He doesn't have any of that stuff associated with him, right? He's just like a force in nature, right? He's just like he is his own thing, and it sort of, I think, makes the world feel bigger. That like, oh, there can be an actor that sort of can even trump all of this predestination, you know, like he's his own thing. And I think that once again, you know, I think a lot of people talk about Luca Blight a lot, like, you know, 20 years later. And I think that, like you said, all of the things we talked about come together to make that be the case, you know?
Yeah. And you were saying this in an earlier conversation we were having, like the game after his death, there's definitely like a Luca Blight shaped hole in it. Like you can feel like the power vacuum of it, which is, I mean, it's great. I mean, even though, like Saf was saying, maybe the villains don't feel as impactful because Luca Blight is the singular character. You know, you still feel the pull of him in the world, even after he's dead.
Because I think that it's also interesting. I think it's an interesting narrative idea, right? Which is that there's so much structured around this guy, right? And then the whole after, it has to be filled by someone, right? And then the question becomes, is it any of these other warring factions? Is it Jowie? Is it Ryu? Right? Is it like, who is it going to be? Right? Because part of it is like, you never intended to take over, right? Like you never intended to like become like the ruler of the kingdom, but sort of that almost gets thrust upon you because no one really thought about what do we do after this, you know, like what's the step 2? And I think that sort of, if we want to get to the ending a little bit now, right? Like one of the endings, the sort of like okay ending, right? The good but not best ending, and according to the game, is like Ryu becomes the leader of the new of the region, basically, right? After you defeat the Highland Army, and like that sort of is the game makes it clear that sort of is being thrust upon you, right? This was never the thing you intended,
right?
But it sort of is. It's the thing you have to do by necessity, and I think that's an interesting moral, you know?
It's sort of what Jowie had to do, right?
Yeah, you sort of end up in the same spot he did. I hadn't even thought about that, but you're totally right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting to look at it from Jowie's perspective. I mean, I wish the game would have delineated that more, like we were saying before. Like they would have given us more scenes of Jowie's perspective to really get it in the middle of the game instead of have to wait for like the perfect ending to really understand what he was going through. Yeah. But I do like thinking about like him having to hold off on like the worst impulses of, you know, the Luca Blight kingdom, you know, the legacy of Luca Blight, basically, which is, you know, symbolized by, you know, the Beast Rune being there and all the shit they did to the town of Muse that in order to summon that horrific thing.
Yeah. And that's something, because we talk a lot about like the high level guys, right? How did you all feel about essentially, because I do think that like they do at least make the smart decision of like, no army is literally just one person, right? There are commanders, there are people that work underneath them, right? And all of them do have their own machinations, and one of them leads to the death of Nanami, or depending on how many people you got, the fake death of Nanami, right? And I know we had a conversation before this about like, I feel like it's a necessary story beat, but I feel like maybe it came at the wrong place from the wrong character, you know?
Yeah. I would agree that it's probably necessary. Like, you need to be able to feel the impact of the war on Ryu. Like, so far he's kind of skated by, even though, you know, all these horrible things have happened to other people. Like, it hasn't affected him personally. So yeah, I mean, seeing Nanami die, or, you know, fake her death or whatever.
It was a good idea, but it was executed poorly, I'd say.
Why do you think that?
Because like it felt so out of nowhere, especially with, as you mentioned, like who kills her, and just this random prick that you barely knew of. It's like, oh, I'm evil and I want to do the evil thing, and he just ends up killing her out of nowhere, and it just feels so random and out of place, and it just kind of like they try and push the story forward through it. Like, I feel as though it could have been executed better in terms of like how she died. Otherwise it seemed like a good idea to do in terms of like trying to teach you the narrative, or trying to teach you of like, again, the consequences of war.
Yeah,
I think I would have liked it a lot more had it been like a character I actually respected, like someone like Leon, or maybe even like her sacrifice to the Beast Rune or something like that.
Yeah,
which would have been, you know, something more impactful. But yeah, you were saying?
Because I feel like I could get where they're coming from, right? Which is like, sometimes there isn't a logic, there is just tragedy, right? Like, sometimes it's not a culmination, it's just a rough moment, right? But I do feel like if you're going to do that, you need to make that more explicit. You know, like, you need to make it, instead of just an implication, like someone being like, oh man, right? And I got the ending where she didn't die, right? And I feel like that ending, generally the like, you get all the stars ending is treated as the canon one, right? Like, Gremio in Suikoden 1 only lives if you get all the stars, and spoilers, he's alive in this game, right? And so I get they establish Nanami obviously wants to run away, right? She's terrified of this stuff, but it is weird that, like, I feel like she would have told Ryu, right? Like, there's no way that she that she like lets her older brother think that she's dead for like weeks at a time, basically. You know?
Yeah.
Like, that to me was always strange, right?
Yeah. That's. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. And it's weird because sort of the canon ending takes away a lot of the personal consequences that Ryu suffers, right? And a lot of that is that they specifically talk about a lot in the lore, that when all the stars are together, fate can be defied, right? And that essentially it's fated that, hey, Jowy's gonna have to die, Nanami's gonna have to die, but by taking the action, you help defy that fate, right? And I think that that's a cool reward for 100%, but it does defang a lot of the theming of the game.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, for both Ryu and for Jowy, like, these are repercussions that you should have to face. Like, I prefer the ending where you don't get everything, I think, because I feel like that's more engaging. I think that fits the tone of the game a lot better than having, you know, some get out of jail free card. You know, you get to leave, and Jowy doesn't face any consequences for being a fucking war criminal, and you know, all this shit.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because I almost feel like if they treated the Jowy dies but Nanami lives as like a canon ending, I would feel like the best about, right? Because I do feel like you said, like, Jowy isn't Sasuke, but he does get away a lot scot-free, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately, I think it would be interesting. I think that the way you also get the Jowy ending is, like, cool from a gameplay perspective, right? You have your final duel. And I think it's cool that he gives you a message like, come meet me, right? And if you have to remember that very first place that you were at the start of the game, right?
Well, they show you the place, like in the final scene, if you don't go there.
And I think that's like a really cool ending, because I think one of the things the RPGs do really well is sort of like the look how far we've come energy, right? Like just the progression. And when I was walking back, I like felt it. I was like, oh man, like this, it does feel like the world's completely changed over the course of this game, right? And then when you get there, just defending, right? You cannot get the ending if you attack Jolly.
Yeah.
And one, that's like that's forgiveness, right? For one, but two, it's the bright shield.
Yep.
The bright
The
shield
shield
protects
room.
against the black sword. That's
Yep.
it. And that's I think that's a really cool like implementation of the theme, right? But the final conclusion is sort of, it does, like I said, like there's pluses and minuses in my head, right? I don't think that even the best ending isn't like the definitive ending in my brain, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. They basically get away. What the conclusion is that like they've roamed the countryside, right? That together, they're back together again. Like, I don't think that should happen.
Yeah.
But yeah. Whatever.
And most players won't encounter that, right? So I think that the ending where Rio becomes the leader is sort of, I think in most people's perceptions, the one that the game ends with,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's good for what it is. Like, you don't have to do it, but it's definitely like a nice thing to have too. Like, like you were saying, it's a good reward, even if it undercuts, maybe like the best overall impact of the game.
Sure.
Yeah.
Were there anything else you guys wanted to talk about the game itself?
Not really.
No.
Saf, you said you hated the world map.
That's true.
Yeah, I didn't. It was just boring. Like, it was just large, empty spaces, and it just gets tiresome when you're just exploring and hunting for characters, and you're just going across the world map without much in the way of fast travel, no like sort of way to speed up travel at all either.
Is there anything beautiful to look at? Is what I wonder.
Nah, there's nothing beautiful to look at. There's none whatsoever.
Damn. What a condemnation.
Shucks.
0 to 10. This game is shitty graphics.
Nice try, Suikoden, but you're not getting by this time.
In the bin you go.
God. Alright.
Oh, actually, there is one other thing. It was like they've used CGI cutscenes sparingly, but you can still see it's kind of bad in some instances. Like, it looks kind of wonky.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't like the CGI cutscenes of the game. I don't think they add much at all.
Yeah.
In order for them to be there, like, they seem like useless.
yeah, it seems like pointless for whatever reason. I don't know why they just. Maybe they want to try and show off some tech or something.
Yeah, it's a sign of the times, you know. Just 3D is new, and we gotta have it for the trailer, so people say, "Dang, look at this," and I look at it and say, "Dang, look at that."
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were speaking of the aesthetic before, and I do like that they stuck with sprite work more than 3D models. You can definitely like go back to Final Fantasy VII, and you can feel like, oh man, this game looks like shit sometimes. Whereas when you play this game, it's gorgeous. I mean, the sprites are gorgeous. The animations are fantastic. Like, it holds up extremely well.
Yeah.
And except for the overworld, it doesn't look beautiful.
Oh god, the overworld looks good. Shut up, you're wrong. It's fine.
Because I do think a testament to that is sort of like Eiyuden Chronicles, right? Which we might talk about some more.
Yeah.
It just got finished Kickstarter funding, right? It is a lot of the original creators of Suikoden coming back to work on a new game that it's clearly in the style of. But I think that it's like, even though obviously the art style is influenced by Octopath a little bit, right? It's influenced by like obviously modern technical innovations. Like, it still clearly is building off that sprite work style of Suikoden almost 20 years ago, right? And I think that really tells you, like, man, it held up a lot more than, Final Fantasy VII Remake was not using the little, like, big-handed polygons for its base,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people have been more overt on how much they appreciate like the old style of those games. It doesn't always have to be like cutting edge graphics like it was back then. Maybe it's just because the fan base has matured or something. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
And the novelty of it's worn off, right?
Yeah.
Like 3D was exciting and new, but we've lived with it for as long as we've had 2D games now,
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's all for Suikoden 2. Apologies for all we missed. But now it's time to put it on the list.
The list.
Wow, Saf, you're not going to participate?
I just did.
I didn't hear you.
Listen, it's late for Saf. He's being respectful to people around him.
Alright, so this is the first Game Club Extra game. This is kind of new territory. I know I kind of chose this game, but going on from here, we're all going to choose games as a group. I feel like, Will, you've had the most experience with this game, having played it twice. Where would you like to see it?
Man.
What thoughts?
Here's the thing. I like this game a lot, and if it gets high with 3 people voting on it, everyone else is going to be mad.
We don't worry about that on the Game Club. We don't worry about that.
We don't worry. It's true. That's true. We don't care. I think it's like as good as Pokemon Black and White, personally. I think it's like around that area of like 29 to 30, which, by the way, in the paste bin below, you can follow along
thank you.
with the overall list.
Boom.
I'm a new hand at this. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. It took me 30 weeks to get that down. So yeah, I think like maybe right above or below Diddy's Conquest is where I was feeling about it. But
okay, all right. Saf, what do you think?
I really like Pokemon Black and White.
Do you like it more than this game?
This game, Suikoden 2, is an incredible story. It's a fantastic story, and I really, really enjoyed how well animated it was and how much depth it had added to almost all of its characters. The only issues that I have is just what I said at the end, and those are minor in comparison to like all this good stuff that's there. And so, yeah, I'll put it above Diddy Kong for sure. I think I'll put it above Black and White, and I'll definitely put it above Diddy Kong.
Okay. Well,
as a result,
do you guys want it any higher than that? Like, how do you feel?
where do you want it, illz?
I mean, I'm fine with above Diddy's Conquest, but I'm wondering, like, what do you think about it versus Earthbound?
Oh man! Now you're asking Will to pick his babies.
Yeah, I am. Pick your babies.
I would say no. I still like Earthbound more.
Yeah, I mean, Earthbound has some other parts that are both of them have parts that like clearly have some jank to them.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even talk about the translation issues of this game, but yeah.
Oh yeah, it's true. I mean, I'll be honest. I like it as much as I like Metal Gear Solid 1, at least, right? So I mean, I'd be fine like above Red Dead if.
Oh my god.
But I don't want, that's my personal. I really love Suikoden 2. I totally understand if you think that's way too high,
So you're being super conservative just to be
well, I don't want to.
He doesn't want any angry letters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're trying to make sure that you don't show any sort of bias or.
We don't do this in the normal Game Club, Will. Come on.
you guys are just unleashed. You just let it fly.
Just strike while the iron's hot.
All right. Well, then if I'm striking while the iron's hot, I think it should be above Red Dead Redemption.
Okay. Saf, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't even think it should be better than, which sounds weird to say, but I don't think it should be better than Mario Kart 8.
That's fine.
Okay.
Or Splatoon 2.
Okay.
Illz, how you feeling?
I'm very flexible at this point. I think above Diddy Kong's quest is very good. Anything above that, I think it's a bonus. I don't have like a strong feeling about it going above anything else. I just wanted to hear your points about Earthbound.
Yeah, I mean, Earthbound, it's weird because they're so different, but in my brain they have such similar strengths, right? Which is the thing that both of them, theming-wise, are very consistent and unique among their genre and the overall scope of video games, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think, and Earthbound has a lot of parts that are frustrating, right? That monkey cave is not fun. I get that. But for me, those larger things always matter more than specific parts that frustrate me. Yeah. And so, but I do think that Earthbound's strengths are still so singular, right? Where I think Suikoden 2 is like, there are other games that touch on those themes, I think, in other ways that are effective. And cool.
While I was playing this game, I was thinking how much of like the premise of it feels so much like Final Fantasy Tactics. Like you have these two characters who are best friends, who are swept up in this war, who kind of anchor the story and become, you know, the main figures of both sides of the war. It's very reminiscent of that game. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess ultimately that's why we still keep it below Earthbound, right? But clearly, I like it a lot still.
Yeah.
But I'm totally fine with either above or below Cuphead. I don't know how you feel about Cuphead.
I haven't played Cuphead.
Okay. Well, then we'll just keep it below Cuphead just for.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Consistency.
All right.
There it is. Go. So number 29 then. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, so surrounding it, we have Mario Kart 8 at number 27, Cuphead, number 28, Suikoden 2 at number 29, number 30 is Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest, and number 31 is Pokemon Black and White. Alright, it's respectable company, I think. Too bad for Will that he wanted it above.
Sorry, Will.
It is what it is.
I'm sorry, Will.
That's fine.
So, some concluding stuff. Recent news about this franchise, like Will was saying, Eiyuden Chronicle was announced on Kickstarter July of this year, the 27th. It made it all the way to $4 million. $4,000,007, I think. $4,700,000. And even though they wanted $500,000 at the start, so it's obviously like a huge success. Like a lot of people were clamoring for a new Suikoden game, and it's from, you know, basically the creator of Suikoden, Yoshitaka Moriyama. And yeah, I mean, it's super exciting. It's coming to all next-gen consoles. I'm very, very excited. Like you were saying, it's supposed to be like Octopath. It's also very much like Suikoden, 6 members, you know. He said he won't be a fully silent protagonist. You have, you know, your headquarter building. You have large scale battles. All the common Suikoden themes are back. So that's really, really cool. So get ready for that. And if you like what we did on this episode, it doesn't have to end here. You can go check out our regular show, which is posted every Monday. It's centered on gaming news and our reactions. And that's hosted by Will usually, or sometimes Muzzy. You can check out our Game Club episodes hosted by Brandon, posted every other Thursday, where we play games that are not quite as long as these games. All of those can be found on our SoundCloud page or our YouTube channel or any other of the podcast services except Spotify because they hate us. And if you loved what you heard here, you can go over to patreon.com and throw us a buck or two and get access to our Discord, as well as the ability to join in the raffle for an upcoming Game Club pick, which happens once every round. Last but not least, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram to know when we're posting episodes, or to follow Saf's random gaming encounters. And sometimes we even show up on twitch.tv, so feel free to give us a follow on any of those. We'd appreciate it. We're going to link in the description to some various YouTube things. I'm going to link to an interview with Rabbit and Bear, the developers of Eiyuden Chronicles, and check them out there. For our next pick, we've collectively decided, right? Is that how we feel? Just making sure, I don't want to talk for you. That we were going to play Kingdoms of Amalur, the Re-Reckoning, which is the new version of it. So that should come out at some indeterminate time. I have no idea. We're going to hope for like a month and a half or 2 months from now. What do you guys think?
Sounds fine by me.
Great.
Excited to see what Kurt Schilling spent $500 million on.
It's going to be a wild ride, I'm sure. Thank you guys for playing this very, very fun game. And for joining me here. And that's it. See you later.